about some of these tunnels, will be dealt with very harshly.
Oil here is perfect for building tunnels. A combination of sand and dust.
أنت نور حياتي وقلبي السعيد بوجودك أحيا بكل معاني أنت البركة أنت النعيم بك تنتمي أحلامي وطاقتي.
Welcome, everybody, to Real Deal Media's original series, The Six Underground. I am your host here tonight, Dean Ryan, and what a challenge it has been to get this episode off the ground, something that is somewhat of an educational ordeal if you look at it, but now just labeled very controversial. For instance, just last night, not even 24 hours ago, some of the footage, which you'll be seeing here tonight, was already uploaded to YouTube and was taken down even if it was on private. In fact, I got the Hi Dean Ryan TV. We reviewed the Gaza tunnels and confirmed it's not allowed under our violent criminal organizations policy. We understand this may be frustrating, but we're committed to keeping YouTube a safe place for everyone via censorship. And that's some of the omens and anomalies I have been tripping over in the past 24 hours. A controversial streak that has followed yours truly to give me the ultimate title of the person of interest as an insider to Google and everything YouTube has now told me. In fact, on the way to the studio where I am currently, well, what do you know? The fire alarm went off and an evacuation happened, and I had to wait to get here tonight. So I've done everything, crossed every T, dotted every I, and jumped every hurdle to be here tonight with all of you. Because this episode is Gaza tunnels, which I guess is one of the 7 dirty words now in the modern era. But we're going to be looking into the Gaza tunnels, as tonight will be part 1 of a deep venture into that part of the region and the underground warfare that's currently at play, and something we've never seen here on the West, which these are hard to broadcast with a difference of opinion and perspectives, which are not allowed on the world arena. So we're going to be looking into some of the warfare that's happening underground, the vastness of it, the up-to-date information coming out about the hostages, plans for Gaza, and ultimately, which I think is crucial to the story, is the betrayal of Netanyahu as we kind of touch the surface of the creation, the financing, and the facilitation of Hamas by Netanyahu himself. I mean, they've created the perfect boogeyman, as you would say it. So we'll be getting into that later in the show here tonight. We'll be joined by former Special Forces of the military, Ranger Buck, who has really had a deep understanding of the deep underground tunnels that is now the modern warfare of the 21st century. Isn't that the case? But if we rewind a little bit and we go back to some of the coverage we have provided for all of you here with our number one late night show, World at War, well, you might have seen a real focused approach on this whole debacle in the Middle East as far back as just weeks after the deadly day of October 7th. And Gaza was completely obliterated all the way back then, and certainly is the case now. In fact, well, here's just the horrors of war as we understand the playing field and maybe why there are tunnels to begin with. The horror of war. Saying they need to also restrict themselves to potential offenses related to the promotion of Hamas in England. You'll be arrested in England if you speak out against Israel. It's just not explicit pro-Hamas symbols they're worried about or chants. It's everything and above. They encourage police to consider whether the chants from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, should be understood as an expression of violent desire to see Israel erased, or is it a desperate cry to the world to pay attention to us. We're living in a destroyed city that's 5 miles wide and 25 miles long. It's called Gaza. We have no hope. We can't escape. Nobody will take us. If we leave now, we'll never get our land back, not even a scope, a fraction of it. As Britain punishes anyone with an independent mind, or how dare they, a freedom of speech act. Conclusion remains to be the same. Gaza is destroyed. People on both sides of this war are dying, and they're innocent by the day. Yet we do nothing, except for arrest those who are dissenting. War is an act of federal diplomacy. It's barbaric in its nature. And it's time we say no to the New World Order and Third World Wars. So as you saw there, the entire region is ravaged. It is a war-torn, very small strip of land, probably even smaller than the Las Vegas Strip, to use an exact measurement of it. But this just didn't come on a surprise visit by the Hamas paratroopers back in October 7th of 2023. This has been in the works for quite some time as the reemergence of Benjamin Netanyahu in recent years really dovetails his future plans for Gaza and the greater Middle East as we know it. For instance, just nights ago, something gave me great validation and vindication as well, all mixed in one, is now the Jerusalem Post over there in Israel. The New York Times of the day for that incredible just country that's learning things, or are they? Well, it's now being said, what we shared with you a while ago, that alleged ties between Netanyahu's and Qatar. Qatar, very interesting. Qatar prompts calls for an investigation. The opposition leader, I guess, who's now challenging Netanyahu, is demanding the Israeli Attorney General will investigate the alleged business ties between close advisors of Netanyahu and officials over there at Qatar, a very dangerous Muslim country, we've been told. I mean, that's kind of the war on terror, is it not? Well, the man came, and as I shared with you just nights ago, as the report just recently came out, that the members of Prime Minister Netanyahu's team over there One of them is currently under house arrest, and he's singing like a bird. And he's now telling people something that would be considered fringe. Well, the suspected relations with Qatar, for instance, involved some of the members of Netanyahu's cabinet, following a serious report of a business connection between the prime minister's advisors and the Qatar government, because they never give the bribery with their own fingerprints, do they? They always have an underlink to have that plausible deniability feature attached to it. Well, they're engaged in improving the image of Qatar, they say, with all this money. Therefore, it was just completely a professional and completely clean slate of a transaction. Well, the shocking suspicions can't be ignored now, because now one of the other gentlemen who was dismissed by Netanyahu, Mr. Galat, well, it's also coming out that maybe October 7th wasn't just the organic, holistic attack that they would like us to believe, kind of like the days and years following 9/11. Maybe there was a perpetrated adversary enemy within Israel who has connected the military-industrial complex in all of its facets to create and manufacture and finance a forever adversary for a forever war. Where have we seen this before? If you're an American, this is a repeat, a rerun of recent history, and it does not fall upon deaf ears. And a lot of people in Israel, we hope at the very least, are waking up to this of the prime minister of Netanyahu. Well, now vindication is proving itself just that. Well, here's a little reminder of that incredible transaction of $18 million that Netanyahu gave the new ISIS of the Israeli West. Check this out. More recently, other damning news has now come out regarding a top secret letter in 2018 by Netanyahu to the country of Qatar, demanding they fund Hamas. Then Prime Minister and current Netanyahu urged Doha to deliver $30 million to Gaza monthly, claiming funding Hamas would preserve regional stability and avert humanitarian crises. In this letter, Netanyahu urged the government of Qatar to continue the transfer of money and funds to Gaza. In this secret letter sent to Qatar, the leadership in 2018 and only seen by a handful of people since, Netanyahu explained that funding would reduce the motivation of terror groups there to carry out attacks and would prevent a humanitarian crisis, and was vital for preserving regional stability. Between 2007 and 2014, Qatar provided Hamas funds away from any international oversight or review. From 2014 onward, funding from Qatar was coordinated with the United States and Israel. This bombshell letter claims the 2014 war in Gaza was the turning point. Many have said the US, UN, Israel, and Qatar decided soon after the war to set up a new system in which the money, all of $30 million, would be delivered to the coastal strip by Doha each month. Some $10 million was to buy fuel from Israel needed to operate Gaza's power station. $10 million to pay for salaries of government employees, and a final $10 million would be given in $100 stipends to some 100,000 Gazan families in need. Furthermore, the U.S. involvement involves then Secretary of Treasury Steve Mnuchin, who is in charge of the finance for campaign to re-elect Donald Trump, who's also of Jewish descent and faith in this case, agreed to a request from Netanyahu and sent additional letter to Prime Minister Doha, this time from Washington, in effect ensuring Qatar that funding Hamas would not be considered funding terror. First installment in cash was delivered November 8th, 2014, and the rest is history that is still unfolding. Prime Minister's office, Netanyahu, did not respond to a request for a comment on this topic at this time. How the world turns and how the plots continue to twist. Twisting, and more revealing by the month here. It's even now coming out that people cannot believe that in a small little country like Israel, that the October 7th was just allowed to happen, or they didn't know. It took them 8 hours. Furthermore, even more of a derelict of duty, it's now coming out that some of the IDF forces fired amongst their own people. For that fact, I mean, we are now approaching the Operation Gladio of hallways here, and nobody is buying the official word anymore. Well, now, kind of transitioning here, a lot of the talk of the tunnels now. Let's get into that. Well, the tunnels are quite vast, which you're going to find out when our former military specialist comes here, Ranger Buck. But the hostages were taken into the tunnels and have never been heard about for almost 2 years now, if not. And the propaganda that's coming from that is really holding true, because the hostages that were taken by Hamas, who were financially provided and facilitated by the IDF, that a deal to release the hostages were offered as far back as January of 2024, just weeks after October 7th, to no avail. And then again, and on and so on, to no avail. And then we see the puff pieces in the Western media that is totally manipulated by Netanyahu. In fact, you might have seen the following.
This is like the tunnel that our hostages are being held in now. They've been in there for over a year. There's no bathroom, there's no food, there's no water. This is Adam, one of the 6 hostages that just got killed. She was in a tunnel like this for almost a year. I'm sorry, Eden, I wish we could have saved you. It's so dark and so scary, and I can't imagine what they're going through. We have to get them home now.
Quite very interesting, isn't it? It's said now that an estimated 40% of Hamas's tunnels still remain. Many Israeli experts are now saying, as the Israeli war intensifies, in some cases is de-escalated, it's up and down, it's the bipolar strategy of the IDF that we're trying to understand. Well, they're saying it's targeting terrorists while negotiating a ceasefire, hostage releases more and more. So right now there's a ceasefire and hostages have been released as we are filming this live, but that could change tomorrow. Well, Israel will continue to pound Gaza if anything changes, which is the new threat. But over the last year, Israel has staged military and massive military operations in Gaza against Hamas, right on that strip, 25 miles long, 5 miles wide. Well, they stated their goals were always to remove Hamas as a governing power in the territory and release all the hostages. That has always been the goal. And somehow that goal has now moved into Lebanon, has knocked on the door of Turkey, and has threatened the surroundings of Iran. Yes, it's a regional conflict that has gone now international. Now, thousands of Israelis have rallied over the course of time now. You might have seen some of those protests, but not in what you would think they would be rallying against. They were rallying for more increased militarization in Gaza, but also in neighboring countries where Egypt has kind of stayed out of this for the most part. They will continue a military presence in Gaza as long as it takes, many have said, which an area consists of structures overlooking the Israeli territories, and it serves as a central terror hub, the IDF says, containing anti-tank firing positions, booby traps, shafts, numerous explosives, launch sites that have targeted Israeli territory. Yes, and it is quite amazing if you haven't seen the vastness of it. So for example, here's a little illustration, which we may revisit shortly. Well, here it is. Here's a illustration of the bunkers. We're talking 2, 3, 4 miles underground. Goes around like a maze. I'm not sure it's that lit under there. You might have to have a lantern, box of matches, if not a flashlight. But yes, they say that Hamas has had 20 years to accumulate massive amounts of firepower, dispersing it in many areas due to the tunnels. It's a widespread underground tunnel network combined with other terrorist organizations, is the claim, such as the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the PLJ, who is kind of the secondary to Hamas, but certainly doesn't get the Netanyahu money. There's also approximately 30,000 fighters now. Many have said this could take 2 to 3 years as a whole to get rid of the entire tunnel system, just for starters. So, yeah, we're talking 20 years to create these just incredible tunnels. Now, the Israeli forces are continuing to find weapon depots to encounter Hamas terrorists throughout the tunnel system. They're saying it's a testament to the continuance of the Hamas presence in the territory. Not that it could be any of the millions of dollars received. So, yes, 40% of the tunnels now, and it requires a very big operation, they're saying, and massive amounts of explosive that Israel currently does not possess. In fact, you may remember the dome. Well, it can't withhold multitudes of rocket fires, as we saw during the conflict with Iran. But yet, it still continues now. Now, there's also, in addition to this, saying Hamas stunned Israel on October 7th. It was stunning when it attacked the south of the country in a rampage that has now killed and approximately killed 1,200 Israelis. Now, which you got to understand, too, we're also finding out that kind of like the Sydney hostage siege in Australia, when there was a lot of people who were killed in that shootout. Well, it was, not the lone gunmen, as we're finding out. In fact, just now, the JFK files is now proving it wasn't just a lone gunman, which goes back to the moral of the story is the official story is really not official, but it protects the officials, doesn't it? Kind of to conclude now is that the war has now developed into regional, as I said, but really international and a multi-front confrontation to the Lebanese Hezbollah organization and to the Houthi rebels in Yemen. Well, they've all begun launching attacks against Israel. It's now coming out as forcing it to respond to the divert critical resources on many other fronts. A fragile and temporary ceasefire with Hezbollah has been in place for what seems to be 2 months now, but that could change at any given moment. So, yeah, Israel does not have the forces or the firepower to withdo or subdue Hamas, who now has built an incredible network of allies. And that's the kind of vastness of the tunnel system that we are dealing with here. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Now, in a recent development, in a fair development, just you might have heard this just days ago, Hamas said they're ready to release and resume the release of more hostages. Now, the group said the mediators were working to remove obstacles and close gaps after the ceasefire deal with Israel hit a roadblock just recently. Israel has nothing to comment about. Well, as early as last Thursday, it was ready to release more Israeli hostages, which have been released, laid out by the Gaza ceasefire agreement after a fragile deal teetered this past week, prompting more pessimism about its future. Well, one of the official spokespeople from Hamas, named Mohammed Mardoui, sent in a text message that the hostage for prisoner exchange was set to go ahead and they will live up to the agreement. Israel, who's not too happy about this, I would assume, did not immediately comment on that in other statements by Hamas describing diplomatic progress. In fact, Benjamin Netanyahu, was consulting security chiefs in southern Israel on Thursday afternoon, his office said. And what about Egypt and Qatar, the sidekick of Netanyahu and his cabinet? Well, alongside the United States, have been brokering the ceasefire agreement for quite some time. Many have said over the course of a year during this devastating war. Now, during the first 6 weeks of the truce, Hamas agreed to release at least 33 hostages in exchange for more than 15,000 Palestinians imprisoned by Israelis. Something you don't hear about in the lamestream. You don't hear about what about hostages and or prisoners from the other side. Well, to kind of close it off now, the Hamas announced it was indefinitely suspend next hostages released to protests of what it described as an Israeli violation to the truce terms. What do I mean by that? Well, Netanyahu threatened to eradicate even more of Gaza and Hamas. Yes, he did. I mean, can you believe it? Unless more hostages were released by noon this coming Saturday, or they're going to resume a campaign of military action in that region. So this is a developing ordeal. We're talking about 60,000 prefabricated housing units. They're going to have to shuffle in there because the entire area is a dustbin at this point. A dustbin. Okay, I want to bring in. We're going to bring in our military expert here, who has really taken notice of the underground warfare that I kind of took notice about all the way far back as 2020. And we're going to talk and look into the vastness of the tunnels. But let's bring in Ranger Buck first and get into it. Buck, welcome back to the 6 Underground here. And, I read all the way far back as 2017 that the next warfare is not going to be in the jungles or in the sand. It's going to be underground. And that's certainly the case here with Hamas. So let's talk about it, Buck.
Yeah, subterranean warfare is the new age warfare. It's what's been going on since 2020, like you said. It actually started before that, 2018, when Commander-in-Chief Trump declared war. Most of the deep state cells that needed to be, rooted out were in underground tunnels, and even underneath Congress, we had Chinese operatives under Congress during January 6th. That's why we had to put 25,000 troops upstairs. The big issue is it's the hardest type of warfare there is. Back in Ranger training, we had advanced mount techniques that we had to use, which is military operations in urban terrain. You have CQB, which is close quarters combat. You have booby traps. You have now you have the modern systems that can map these things out with LiDAR. I don't know if you know much about that, but they've got the ability to use laser technology with LiDAR that can penetrate the ground and map these out. Of course, I wanted to present a map tonight, but all the maps are classified, and I'm not allowed to use any of those maps. But it's the hardest type of warfare there is. There is some technology that they're starting to use in this space. They use canines too. We used canines in the Rangers, but robot dogs, drones. Actually, they'll use drones to fly in through these tunnels. Because the biggest issue is you come into these close quarters, and you don't know what's going to be around the next turn. And you can imagine. Right. I mean, everybody's seen the movies like Platoon, where you got the tunnel rats and stuff that were special guys that would go into the tunnels, and you just imagine how dangerous and how gut wrenching that would be to do that type of warfare. So I don't know, what we've done a lot of is flooding tunnels, like under the Capitol DC tunnels were flooded after January 6th, leading up to the inauguration, to get those Chinese out of there.
Sure. Here, I want to ask you, Buck, and we're going to get to everything of the most updated nature. But before we do, how does one military personnel, how does one soldier, how are they training the United States military in the West, for that fact? How are they training military people today to fight in the underground? What does that look like? What does that entail? Or is it just really an air campaign of just bunker busting bombs going into these 2-mile deep tunnels? So how's the training for this? What does that consist of?
Yeah, it's the military operations in urban terrain, training, close quarters combat, advanced mount techniques. It's basically stacking on each other, muzzle awareness all the time, and clearing rooms. There's a lot of training that goes into clearing these tunnels, and it's the same as clearing rooms in the upper, in the building space. One thing they do here with these Gaza tunnels, they call it the Gaza Metro. There's 300 miles of tunnels in that 5-mile by 25-mile square area. That's just hard to believe that there's that many miles within such a small area. But they've been building them, like you said. Well, actually, they go back to 300 BC,
Right.
BC find tunnels in Israel and around that area, and some of them are a lot of them are 66 to 100 foot deep, and those are the ones that the lower ranking members of Hamas and Hezbollah and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard has a presence in these tunnels. And
Well,
they also have tunnels going to Egypt where they smuggle
right.
their food and ammunition and weapons.
Well, I want to address this too because as you were hearing earlier, it's being stated that Israel doesn't even have enough firepower to further escalate a confrontation with the underground warfare of Hamas, and that certainly was the case with the so-called Iron Dome, as it was literally getting penetrated by the outside forces. One of them being Iran in the past year. So a lot of this is really kind of based on the financial insurance and support of the United States, but this goes against the exact policy of the new administration, which we're going to really touch upon shortly. So what is Israel to do? Because they financed Hamas, they created these guys as far back as 2014. They're not going to go peacefully, are they, or satisfied? They turned down the hostage release, but Netanyahu is doing the classical case of wag the dog, is he not?
Yeah, without getting too political, because this is a very, like CIC Trump says, a very complex situation. Like you said, we've paid, Joe Biden, the Biden administration gave $8 billion to Iran. In the next week or two, all of a sudden, Hamas is attacking Israel. So, we're playing both sides, and of course, we've also built these tunnels with our money to Iran, and we've given money directly to the Palestinians, especially through like USAID, and that's one reason CIC Trump had to get control of the USAID, because it's financing all these endless wars and drumming up hate on both sides.
Buck, we're talking $310 million by USAID, the slush fund of the CIA, given to Hamas. I'm telling you, it's a creation of the IDF to create Gaza terror tunnels. I mean, you talk about rinse, recycle, repeat of everything ISIS and Al Qaeda. It's right here, right before our eyes. And I don't know how many people in Israel are waking up to this because everyone else can see it. But 310 million. So what is the purpose of that? It can't be just for humanitarian aid. It has to be for to get us into World War III, don't you think?
Well, it takes a lot of money to finance the concrete to build these tunnels, and that's they needed more concrete apparently. But I don't understand. I mean, well, this all goes back to the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us of, that John F. Kennedy tried to fight when he got in. Of course, that's what got him killed. And controlling the purse strings of this world conglomerate globalists that want to create situations of genocide. There's a power out there of these globalists that want to destroy Gaza and create exactly what CIC Trump says, Caesar's palace on the Gaza Strip. The whole reason he said that is he's trolling them and
right,
getting them to, because that's what people would want.
I want to come back to that point after the break. We have a break coming up, but when you talk about the capture of perception, it really goes to the capture of media, and people only know what they're spoon-fed. To really understand and self-educate, you have to seek. I want to play something you sent me, and I think this really expresses why, which in part 2 of this, we're going to really get into why is there Hamas? Why are there these so-called terrorist groups to begin with? And then we'll actually in part 2 get into the underground tunnels and bunkers over there in Israel, which you want to get to the heart of trafficking, you got to look where you're not supposed to. But here's the human cost again from the Indian perspective, if you know what I'm saying. Here it is.
Media tour to show exposed tunnel shafts in Gaza. The IDF said the tunnels in Rafah were uncovered by the Israeli troops. The tour included a stop at an entrance to an underground chamber. The Israeli military said the bodies of the 6 Israeli hostages were recovered there on the 1st of September. Israeli military spokesperson Daniel Hagari told reporters that a maze of tunnel exists in the area.
There is a complete maze of tunnels here in Tel Sultan. You just heard the shootings. We're still looking at searching for terrorists. This area, we're gathering all the DNA and the forensic to find and hunt those terrorists who committed this horrific crime.
Israel is also facing condemnation after a strike at a school turned shelter in Gaza killed 18 people, including UN relief staff. The attack flattened part of the school, leaving only a charred heap and concrete. The Israeli military says it targeted Hamas militants, but UN chief Antonio Guterres has called the strike totally unacceptable.
We see this through time and time again. We even saw it through the Vietnam War, if not earlier, that, well, that's where a terrorist was hiding. That's why we had to completely obliterate a hospital or a school. I mean, Buck, people are not buying this. Even supporters of the Israeli military are really not chirping very loudly anymore like they were 2 years ago. Has the facade worn off? Kind of the way it did with America once we invaded Iraq? Do you think we're at that critical sea change?
Well, I think there is a awakening happening around the world, and I believe that as more light is displayed on these. I mean, you go back to ISIS. We had John McCain and Mitt Romney, and those guys created ISIS in order to have their own underground war in Syria and to try to take out Assad on behalf of the Saudis. It's all a money-making operation for them because they're getting money from the Saudis to support ISIS, and they're getting their kickbacks. And of course, that's why that's why CIC Trump was willing to criticize John McCain and call him a traitor, basically, because he got captured. He wasn't talking about captured in Vietnam. He was talking about captured in the whole ISIS and the Al Qaeda. I mean, we're supporting both sides again, and it's all for the military industrial complex and these CIA agents and these operatives that go from the board of Raytheon and then to the head of the Department of Defense. And how do they sell bunker busting bombs that Raytheon actually produces? Number one producer in the world of bunker busting bombs. How do they sell those to Israel? They convince Congress that, hey, we've got a war, we've got these tunnels throughout Gaza. I mean, now on the other hand, you do have Palestinians who hate Israelis, and they have built a tunnel network in this area,
right,
that they could pop up anywhere. But the technology now, there's no excuse for. In fact, we're moving into the ability to track and trace everybody in 24/7 surveillance
Sure.
through Gwyn towers. So that's one of the things that gets me with Israel specifically. They have the technology to defeat these guys with no problem whatsoever. So to really have to do this,
right? Well, here to further accentuate what Buck has been really showcasing. Most people are unaware, this is wonderful, that gifted in 2016 $310 million of taxpayer money to start the Palestinian cement factory project. It was a private venture by a company called CENSORED to create cement mills and factories, helping build Hamas terror tunnels. And I'm even willing to say, okay, that Netanyahu had a hand in it. In fact, he sure as hell did back in 2014 with all the millions he gave. So their resources company is a Palestinian publicly traded company over there and has profited handsomely from purchase of cement, foreign aid, particularly from the U.S. aid, John McCain's favorite hangout area, UNRWA, and the UN. So there you have it. Help build the Hamas tunnels in Gaza, which was planning in preparation for the self-inflicted wound October 7th, sponsored by the same people who are decrying. And it goes on and on and on. And I'll tell you what, there it is. There's the concrete proof, pun very intended. And I'll tell you, Buck, people are not buying what is being served on a Israeli platter here, are they? The support for this has gone down the tubes, kind of like the ratings for Biden, who was funding this. And much like I said, too, in the Ukrainian war, to, hop and skip to that one, is all those weapons we were giving, all those weapons I shared with people, they're going to come back home to roost. They're not for the Ukrainians, were they? And the same applies here, doesn't it, Buck?
Right. And you've got CSE Trump drops hints all the time. And one of the hints he's dropped in this case is he keeps saying over and over, this war would have never happened had the election not been stolen. And that's a twofold, who stole the election? Who financed the stealing of the election? It's the same people that have been doing these forever wars, and
Right.
the same people that have been making money off of USAID. So, he gives us clues. He also says, that they asked, well, nobody supports this peace plan that you have for Gaza Strip. And the reporters will ask him these questions, and he was like, well, they will support it. If they don't support it now, they will. And, he knows more than they know. And
They sure do.
another issue on that is ever since he announced it, he has Turkey calling, he has Egypt calling, he has Jordan calling, and they're all begging to be part of the rebuilding process.
We're going to get into that after this break. But before we do, look at this, just one more moment here, as now even ISIS terrorists seen inside tents supplied by who? By who could be supplying the tests? What does it look like? Oh, it's U.S. aid. The Pentagon would airdrop weapons to Al-Qaeda, how convenient, and ISIS in Syria, later dismissing it as an error, like, that happens all the time. This collaboration with terrorist groups has been ongoing since 2011. John McCain can attest to that from the grave, although it might be hot where he is. U.S. aid needs to be abolished and not reformed. I concur wholeheartedly without a blink. It's all there. We'll look at more of that too. Okay, stand by there, Buck. We're going to take this quick break and really get into U.S. aid a little bit more, the vastness of the tunnels, and the new plan for Gaza. We can duke it out and see what that will consist of. Stand by there. Okay, we're going to get back and get into a lot more of this. Plus, where does it go from now for Gaza going into the future? So you're watching a very special series, 6 Underground. We'll be back after this quick message. Don't go anywhere. Who knows how long I loved you? Who knows how long it's been? Will I wait a lonely lifetime? If you want me to, I will. Love you forever and forever. Love you with all my heart. Love you whenever we're together. And even when we're apart, who knows how long I love These are the tunnels the Israelis say Hamas fighters used to move weapons and hostages. The dark and damp corridors give you a sense of what it was like for those hostages on October 7th when they were dragged into Gaza and spread throughout the Strip. When it comes to finding an enemy hiding in a labyrinth of tunnels, many military experts will tell you it's not a place you want to send your troops. They say it's very dark, claustrophobic, narrow. You lose your sense of direction immediately. You lose completely a sense of time. So when you walk in them, you would be disoriented for sure, but also incredibly afraid. Hamas claims to have 300 miles of tunnels in Gaza, a subterranean complex that effectively serves an all-purpose military compound. According to Israel, the underground space includes military headquarters, sleeping quarters, as well as workshops to make and store rockets. The Israeli military has overwhelming firepower compared to Hamas, but the group's underground passageways crisscross throughout Gaza and are designed to allow Hamas fighters to quickly surface and strike Israeli troops without warning, without a hint of presence. Hamas has been shoveling for a long time in anticipation of such a battle. Many people who are close to the matter remember the tunnels were part of the Israeli security discussions when Israel's deputy national security advisor in the early 2000s saw it fit. He said, "You don't believe the enemy can do X, and so you don't see it." Then in retrospect, it always turns out there's lots of information in the system, but smart people, ignored it, which seems to be a theme since October 7th. The Israeli ground troops now retreating. The tunnels have become a key factor in this war. In recent military briefings, Israel said Hamas has constructed military headquarters directly beneath Gaza's largest hospital, Al-Shaif. Spokesperson for the IDF said Hamas terrorists operate inside under the Shifa hospital and other hospitals in Gaza with a network of terror tunnels. Although Hamas vehemently denies this, the group says Israel makes these accusations to justify relentless bombing campaigns that have already killed thousands of Palestinian civilians. Although it's not known exactly what specific time frame these tunnels and the creation of them took place, Hamas first used the tunnels to shock Israel in 2006. The group dug a passageway under the Gaza border fence and emerged on the Israeli side. Now that the entire Gaza Strip has been obliterated, tunnel bunkers have been sought after and eliminated. Will the conflict end with the return of hostages and the announcement of a takeover by the United States, Egypt, now Jordan, or there'll be a new manufactured boogeyman to justify a greater Israeli project? Only time will tell. Real Deal Media and the 6 Underground. This is Dean Ryan. Thank you, Dean Ryan. Thank you for that lovely report. We are back here at the 6 Underground. This is really eye-opening for many who this could be very well just new to. A lot of people are going to be novices before this. They might be experts by the end of it. We're going to continue our really, really in-depth conversation with Ranger Buck, who has really been kind of with me as we have explored the tunnels and underground systems of LA, which recently has just went up in flames, as you know. If you haven't seen that episode, check it out. But let's continue a discussion because I guess I should show this too before I bring Buck back here. Yes, $1.1 billion to Gaza in various forms, including cash. Government helped Hamas directly build Gaza into the cesspool of terrorism. This is why U.S. aid was shut down. I mean, it goes on and on. U.S. government must be held accountable for enabling a project that strengthened Hamas. The fix is in. The fix is in. And there's Trump talking about it. The fix is in. Self-inflicted, wag the dog, military-industrial complex mixed with the ethno-state gone awry on steroids, all in one. Buck, let's get you back here on the stage. Okay, let's talk about this now. You just saw that 1.1 billion they're finding, and we haven't even begun, as the Doge has not begun, I should say, to really open the decrepit files over there at the Pentagon. And boy, we're going to find not just dead bodies, but we're going to find a lot of transactions to the very people we're told to hate. And as far as I'm concerned, Buck, and I'll get your take, this really lives up to Albert Pike's fruition of Israel would be sparking the next world war, come hell or high water, which would then create a flotilla of atheism across the world. Hence why the red heifer exercise ceremony was postponed. And here we are. It's self-inflicted and the fix is in. Buck, what say you on that front?
Yeah, absolutely. We're coming into an age now that there's really no need for warfare, especially with the ability to read everybody's mind and the hive mind technology, and then the Stargate technology and the AI and everything. I mean, it's scary at the same time. However, what I would think is going to possibly happen. I don't know if it's kind of funny that how they have predictive programming. Well, one of the things that's recently happened, February 6th, there's been an outbreak of earthquakes on the Santorini Islands, which are 1,200 kilometers away from Israel. And of course, there's Ariel Heinemann, senior geologist with the Institute of National Security Studies in Israel. What do you think Institute of National Security Studies is? you know, Anyway, he said that such a cluster of quakes, because there were like 1,000 quakes in
Right.
just a matter of 24 hours. Such a cluster of quakes usually precede a major quake. And so then they've been preparing their tsunami warnings. And of course, like I was saying with the predictive programming, where are the people of Gaza going to go if there is a tsunami? And how would you get rid of the 40% of the tunnels that are left by flooding them with seawater? What do we have patents for? Technology to create tsunamis, to explode underwater. I mean, they have nuclear devices, but they also have thermobaric devices that can create tsunami waves up to 1,200 feet. So I would think that instead of having to bulldoze the entire Gaza Strip, there's probably a military industrial complex guy that's trying to sell a thermobaric weapon that they can plant under the sea that will take out Gaza and create a tsunami that'll finish off the tunnels and clear it for everybody.
Now let's now transition to this because obviously U.S. aid is really shown a very contrast narrative to the one that has been birthed in the past 2 years. So let's talk about the going forward, the future of Gaza. Just days ago, you had Trump make the announcement that was pretty bombastic. It was quite left field. At afar, the perception is Trump wants to build, a Trump Tower in Gaza. But let's talk about what all this means. Let's kind of negate the what was said for the peanut gallery here, because you have the Chinese naval ships all along that coast around Israel and Gaza. You have now Russia, who's in the area. But you also have the Greater Israel Project, and Netanyahu and his cohorts wanted the next, or I should say, the new Israel to be in Ukraine, meaning they're willing to sacrifice the lives and goodwill of sorts of his own people and get people to hate it, to then move it over to Ukraine with the just free passageway of the Mossad asset himself, Zelensky. Well, that has gone awry. So it has been said by many scholars that the power grab, like China does on the daily, was Netanyahu was going to completely grab the Gaza Strip in addition to the West Bank. But you said to me that it was really China also that was hoping to do a power grab and take over Gaza. And I thought that was a plausible perspective, because we see that happening right now in Congo. As the Chinese construction crew and military, the PLA, are all up and down that continent. And why wouldn't they want to be in Gaza to fight their proxy war with Israel? What's your take on that? Who is really sodding after Gaza?
Well, I think everything revolves around China at this point. Everything is in China's court. so to speak. The ball is in their court. They have to make some serious decisions. Before COVID hit, they had already controlled the ports. They had made contracts with BB on the vaccines. On the they had secret contracts with Pfizer and Moderna. A lot of those vaccines were actually produced in Ukraine. Like you said, Ukraine is another money laundering operation that, basically Israel is. That's for even when it was set up back after World War II, when the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, and the World Banking cabal, they created ministries. That's what the ministries are for, is to, and then we send $8 billion or more a year. That's just in straight aid to Israel. There's all kinds of other avenues that money goes to Israel, but it's all the ministries are just like this money laundering schemes, and the whole thing is, and that's what Ukraine has become. And they've even gone as far as created alternative treasuries that Chinese hacked, where the China hacked our treasury 2 weeks before, or a month before Trump took office. China basically copied our treasury computers. They got access to all the workstations, and Joe Biden actually wrote a letter to Congress and told Congress about it, that China got our entire treasury system. And so then all these people were freaking out because Elon has access to it. At least he's not China. China copied it before Elon did, because what they're doing is they're copying it with AI and then putting
Right,
it like
right.
Elon copied it and put it in Colossus now. And the reason for that is when it goes down, when it goes dark, when the whole systems are cut, when the lines under the underwater sea cables are cut and the whole system's cut off and all that, then they can bring it back up through Starlink. And now China is creating their own Starlink. So we're really on the verge of World War III, and the ball's in China's court. That's why Commander-in-Chief Trump today was talking about he wanted to meet with China, Xi Jinping, and Russia, and he wants to de-escalate everything, because we know where we're going right now.
Oh, well, and you also have J.D. Vance, who is actively currently over there in France with the invitation from Macron for an AI conference with the who's who, the world leaders. The Trump of Canada was there himself, Trudeau. In fact, just to rewind ever so slightly, which will only highlight what we're really talking about here. This is Trump discussing Gaza, and then we're going to give you the most update intel that's now coming about with that particular region. Here's Trump talking about Gaza just days ago. Here it is.
You said before that the U.S. would buy Gaza, and today you just said we're not going to buy Gaza.
We're not going to have to buy. We're going to have Gaza. We don't have to buy. There's nothing to buy. We will have Gaza.
What does that mean?
No reason to buy. There is nothing to buy. It's Gaza. It's a war-torn area. We're going to take it. We're going to hold it. We're going to cherish it. We're going to get it going eventually, where a lot of jobs are going to be created for the people in the Middle East. It's going to be for the people in the Middle East, but I think it could be a diamond. It could be an absolute tremendous asset for the Middle East. And you're going to have peace. It's going to bring peace in the Middle East. Gaza, the way it is right now, every 10 years, you're going to have the same thing happening. I've watched it so long, all the death and destruction of Gaza. The civilization's been wiped out in Gaza. No, it's going to be a tremendous thing. It's fronting on the sea. It's going to be a great economic development job. It's going to put people to work, a lot of people to work. And those people are all going to be from the Middle East.
So, yeah, there you saw it right there. Now, since that caused hysteria, Trump really knows how to cluster freak the headlines where New York Times, they can't even keep up. Well, this is just now coming out. Jordan and Egypt. Yes, Jordan and Egypt have both united against Trump's vision, which you're going to see is the title of the headline by Politico, who oddly enough, before we go, received how many millions from USAID? So expect that slant to it. The leaders of Jordan and Egypt railed against Trump's plan to displace Palestinians from Gaza in parallel statements on Wednesday, just a day after. So yeah, you're seeing this. You're thinking, why has this been done? Now, since a lot of this has now come out, both countries have agreed to rebuild with their finances their most closest neighbor in that region, Gaza. Now, Buck, having that said, uh, did Trump pull the wool over Netanyahu's eyes during that press conference that we saw just days ago as well? Because he looked stunned when Trump made the announcement. Because, quite frankly, isn't this exactly what Netanyahu wanted to do? Was to take the entire region in addition to the West Bank? Because
Exactly.
that's what it looks like to me. Go, please tell
Exactly.
us
Of
more.
course, Israel wanted to do it, but of course, Israel is an outreach of the United States, and he's thinking, oh, well, Trump will let us do whatever we want. And that's why Trump tells him everything he wants to hear. And what he was really doing was showing the world what Bibi wants without Bibi, because Bibi won't say it, because Bibi, there would be war if Bibi would have said it. So, it's bad enough that Trump said it, but it's also, it also united the Middle East
Right.
around an alternate plan. Now, here's where China comes involved, because
Yes, tell us.
it's a slap in the face to China, because China already thought before COVID came along, they thought they owned the ports and they were doing the Silk Road initiative, so they were going to be the supply line from. They had already agreed. They had already made a Silk Road agreement with Bibi, and uh, and the vaccine agreement, and the vaccines were all about security. They were going to put these vaccines in everybody, including the Palestinians, and then they can control them through the 5G Gwyn towers and the
Interesting.
inserted mesh antennas, the self-assembling nanobots that allow them to they get to identify you, like it's 100% DNA based
Wow.
identification. When the Gwyn tower relays and hits you, when they hit you with the frequency, they can pick up your actual DNA sequence and your biofrequency, your resonant biofrequency, which is the most accurate form of identification that you can have. And they can pick that up with the Gwyn tower, so they know. So once they had the vaccine in everybody, they know where they are. They can track them. They can monitor them, and then they can determine. They can actually read your mind and know whether or not you're going to be a terrorist before you attack. So
isn't that something?
That's what Bibi agreed to, and China had the technology. That's why China unleashed COVID on the world, and now that's going to come out, and we're gonna see that this all was a sinister plan of world domination and control. And
Sure.
Bibi actually was quoted back then when he signed the agreements with China that we're going to be the number one number one most secure nation in the world. And that's what they plan to do through the Gwyn towers and the mind control and the hive mind control and the vaccine distribution. So it all goes back to Israel.
That's
All this stuff goes back to Israel and USAID, because USAID was funding all that. Plus, they were funding the Politicos and the Reuters and AP and all the news organizations to spread fear among the population so that we would accept.
Oh, absolutely. Buck, as we are kind of closing off here, are we going to see a military presence, do you think, in Gaza? Because is it going to be a forever kind of province that we're going to, just like Okinawa, we're going to have a military presence just off the shore, if not on land? Because that's not going to go well with the American people, especially the what has been deemed as the MAGA supporters. That is not going to go well. But then again, you're not going to hear Trump explain it like this. Do you think there's going to be a presence? Boots on the ground.
I don't see American soldiers being used. It is a possibility. There is a possibility that China. I mean, because I don't, not to get biblical or anything, but this could set up be the setup to bring China? Because in the Bible, there's a beast and a antichrist that brings 2
Right.
million troops across the Euphrates to fight it out in Armageddon, which is located
Well,
on the
I'll
other
tell
side
you,
of Lebanon.
Euphrates is it's dried up now. The river's dried up, so it's
I
a
know.
clear
So you can
passageway.
see if China wanted to enforce their agreements on the ports, because they owned the ports, they had made agreements to contractually own the ports
Right.
in Israel. They made that agreement. And if Turkey's going to own ports, if Jordan's going to own ports, if there, because that's what Trump is doing. He's trying to build a coalition against China, and he's trying to cut
Right.
China
I
off of their
definitely
Silk
see
Road,
that.
and that's the biggest problem. Whereas, how much of this is China going to take? Because we cut them off at the Panama Canal.
That's right.
They're trying to make waves on Suez with Egypt. Now we got a bargaining chip with Egypt because Egypt was going to close off the Suez for China. Now that's an issue. We also have the Horn of Africa, or the Morocco. We've got that, the Gibraltar Strait, or the Strait of Gibraltar. We've got that problem because Spain controls one side and the Prince of Morocco controls the other. China's been making a bunch of deals with the Prince of Morocco to try to get him to cut us off there, which would cut us off of the Mediterranean, which cuts us off from Greece, which cuts us off from Italy, which cuts us off from Israel. So this is a bigger deal than what people think it is, because
It truly is.
we are at war with China. China's the one that released a biological weapon on us because the payments were due on the 80 billion.
Well,
actually,
and we can't discount the amount of espionage from our very own so-called government employees that were trading secrets to China. I mean, Bill Clinton was giving the nuke codes to China all the way back in 1996. So you want to talk about China, we can't forget the supporting cast that allowed this to happen. Final question in closing here, Buck, is a lot of people are reactionary in a time of a reactionist kind of world. And a lot of the questions, the pessimism, if you will, is Trump as being a lapdog of Netanyahu and Israel for that fact. Where do you stand on that point, kind of as we close here? Because I kind of see maybe a different aspect of it, of Trump is actually playing the Zionist, if you will. Where do you see that falling into line?
Yeah, he tells them what they want to hear. That and I don't know if he was arrested or not, but that's what usually this hand signal here in the back. That's what that means. He's basically calling him out as a World Economic Forum Illuminati leader that was behind basically Corona, because the military operation, the ongoing military operation that's going on now, is taking out the deep state and the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, and the Chinese CCP individuals that tried to destroy the world and tried to kill
Interesting.
a third of the population or more. Actually, some of the tabletop exercises were 2.3 billion people would die under COVID if they would have done what they were supposed to do.
And the crazy thing is, Buck, they're not stopping. I mean, just yesterday you had the so-called health minister of Canada, who I refer to as the death minister, create and starting to mandate the new miracle jab scheduling for all little babies to a certain age of the teenage years. So this is not stopping. The genocide isn't just in a Mediterranean, Middle East sandpit. It really is worldwide in this case. But Buck, I want to thank you for adding your perspective here tonight for the 6 Underground, and let's try to get you back for part 2 of this entire equation.
All right. Now, that what I would like to finish with is they
Yes, please go ahead.
manufactured 2 billion bird flu vaccines already that are, and they're the same thing as corona, the mRNA technology. That's all it is. It's the same
Could
thing
be.
because they can code it to whatever protein they want it to produce. So it's not
There you have
really,
it.
they don't have to change the form of it. So they've got 2 billion ready to go. Now who's going to eat those? Like they're going to use those somewhere,
Of course.
and there's going to
Yeah.
be a big push for that. Although
Well, you know, what remains to be seen. I think it's gonna stem from Africa. But Buck, we are short on time. Well, I'll talk to you after the show here. Thank you very much. Okay, there you have it. Well, you know, this kind of concludes part 1 here of the Gaza tunnels that have really just fascinated historians, war buffs who know anything about warfare. Certainly, Buck's one of them. But we are witnessing the sea change across the world right now, by the hour, every hour. And a lot of what we learned over the course of 5 years in this module training has really prepared us for what's to come. And we do have the power of change, and it's through information and conversation, understanding, and really grasping history as it's now unfolding right before us. So I want to thank Ranger Buck for being here tonight, and we'll have him back for part 2, as we hope you join us for that feature as well. So for Buck and for everyone else here at Real Deal Media's 6 Underground, I'm Dean Ryan saying thank you for sharing a bit of your night with all of us. In the meanwhile, never forget to stay tuned and stay awake. Good night, everybody.